Okay, we're going to get started. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for really a very, very special program with a very, very special person from a very special organization. Eli Beer is known worldwide throughout the Jewish community and beyond as the founder and president of United Hatzalah. As many of you know, United Hatzalah is the largest independent, nonprofit, fully volunteer emergency medical service organization that provides the fastest and free emergency medical response throughout Israel. Their ambu cycles are ubiquitous. They support the efforts of the other ambulance services in order to respond more quickly. Eli was a visionary, is a visionary. When he founded this, he showed such a vision and entrepreneurship in founding this organization. And I just want to make one brief comment so that we can hear more from Eli. And that is, I was thinking, we're doing this, pre-Hanukkah. And so naturally, there's this sense that, Hanukkah is about Jewish heroes, the Maccabim, who are Jewish heroes. And I know all of us feel like we're in the presence of a Jewish hero. But I don't know if I would compare Eli and his army of volunteers, his first responders. I don't know if I would compare them to the Maccabees. The Maccabees had to wage battle. The Maccabees had to put themselves in danger and perhaps even take life. And yet what United Hatzalah does, what Eli does, what all of those volunteers do is to save life and to protect life. So perhaps I would shift away from the Maccabees for a moment and think about the first person who was a first responder in the Torah. The first person who was a first responder in the Torah was Avram Avinu. When Avram saw that Lot and his family and his whole town were in danger, Avraham, who was not a warrior, who was not a military man, girded himself for battle in order to save life, in order to protect life. He responded first. He was the first responder. And I would invoke Avraham as the model, which Eli and all the first responders as part of United Hatzalah, they're the ones that they follow. And then as I began to think about Avraham a little bit more, and this notion of responding in order to save life, I realized that, perhaps we could make a connection to the Maccabees. Because the Maccabees, like anybody else who has to put themselves in danger, who has to take risks, they do so hoping that there is someone who will respond when they're in danger. That's why armies have a chovesh. They have somebody who is a medic, and that's why we go about our daily lives knowing that if God forbid something should happen, there are people there who will respond. So I would invoke the fact that the Maccabees represent this notion of having to go out and do what you got to do, knowing that there's somebody there who is going to swoop in and rescue should God forbid danger come. Eli is someone who follows that who follows that model, who inspires many to follow that model, and most recently, he himself was the recipient of this sort of response when he contracted COVID early on, and he was in the hospital in a very serious situation. And thank God, Hashem provided refuah and Yeshua to Eli so that he can carry on his very sacred and important work. We are very blessed. We are honored. We're privileged here at Avatorah in Englewood to be able to have this program and to hear from Eli this morning. As I turn it over to him, he's going to say a few words. I'm going to ask him some questions. If anybody else has any questions they want to ask, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will convey those questions to Eli.
So first of all, thank you so much for the introduction. It really means a lot to me to be part of.
It's a little hard to hear you. I'm sorry. Is there
Yeah, I could. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, now's a little better.
All right. So first of all, if you don't hear me, just let me know, and I want to make sure that everyone hears me well. And if you have a recording for this, people should hear, people listening afterwards, they should hear well, and you shouldn't need any translations for my words. So if you don't hear well, let me know. So first of all, it's great. It's a great honor to be here in Avos Torah, even through Zoom. I'm in Eretz Yisrael now. I'm in Hatzalah. I'm visiting someone who's a very close friend of United Hatzalah. And just as I was driving here, I get a phone call from a volunteer who told me that he delivered 2 babies today. 2 babies were delivered by him, and he was telling me how much he enjoyed doing this today more than ever. To deliver 2 babies, women who are on the way to the hospital in Yerushalayim. And the volunteer says to me, "Eli, thank you so much for allowing me to volunteer in United Hatzalah." So I didn't think I actually told him thank you for being a volunteer in United Hatzalah. And he said, we were talking for a while I was on the car, and he says, I save people from heart attacks and strokes, and he was in bomb attacks, but bringing life to this world is the highest level of his volunteering. And, every day United Hatzalah volunteers deliver about 6 babies around the country. And to have one volunteer deliver 2, I was really, really happy to hear that. And to share this with the community by you. And Baruch Hashem, I had my personal nest this year. It's a real big nest. I was between here and Shemayim. I was on a ventilator for almost a month. And I'm sure you want to hear more, but this was my personal nest that here, and before Hanukkah, I'm sharing some of the nisim that United Hatzalah volunteers are doing and my own personal nest. So thank you for having me.
So do you want to talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea of United Hatzalah?
Yes, I was a young boy. I grew up in Yerushalayim in Beit Vagan. My parents were Olim Chadashim from the United States, and when I was 6 years old, I was right next to a bus that blew up, the number 12 bus in Beit Vagan. It was one of the worst terror attacks then. It was actually the first terror attack on a bus in Israel. And 6 people were killed and many people were injured. And I remember people laying there on the floor waiting for help. As a child, I didn't understand exactly what was going on, but I was so scared when I saw everything going on. And I was so scared when a man was screaming to us, me and my brother, to help them get up from the floor, that he was just laying there. And we just ran away and we left him on the floor there. And that bothered me for many years. And when I was 15 years old, I saw the opportunity. They had a sign on a tree in Yerushalayim to do a course of an EMT, emergency medical technician, and become a volunteer in an ambulance. And I did it. It was a 44-hour course. And after that, I became a volunteer in the back of an ambulance. And it was incredible to help people. It was really a good feeling helping people that needed it. But I realized after a year and a half volunteering in the back of an ambulance that although we were doing great work helping people, we never got to save anyone. We would get to situations where people were choking or having a serious heart attack or drowning. We got to situations, really bad situations of car accidents. And by the time we got there, because of the distance and the traffic, it was too late to save them. Sometimes we came only 20 seconds or 30 seconds too late. And then they had a 7-year-old boy who was choking while he was having lunch, and his mother called for help. And we were the ambulance that were dispatched for that emergency. And it took us 21 minutes to get there. We came from Har Sofim, which is Mount Scopus, to Beit Vagan, the same neighborhood I grew up in. And when we got there, we heard the screaming and the yelling of the mother. We ran upstairs. We started performing CPR, trying to get the object out, the Heimlich maneuver. And a few seconds later, a doctor runs into the house and he sees an ambulance parked downstairs. He says, "I'm here, I'm a doctor. I'm an emergency room doctor." And he says, "What happened?" We told him what happened, and he was working with us for a while. And then he says, there is nothing we could do, just bring a sheet to cover this child. And this was the worst moment of my life. I was 16 and a half years old. I see a 7-year-old boy who choked to death. And we were there, but we tried our best. We couldn't do more. We really tried our best, working hard to try to save this kid. But a doctor was 2 blocks away when this thing happened, and no one told him that this kid is suffocating to death while we were trying to fight traffic and distance. In that moment, I realized that, you know what, ambulances are very, very important to save people, to transport people. But if we really want to get there and save people on time, ambulances are not the solution. We need to get people like this doctor and other people who know what to do to respond before ambulances. And I decided to start Hatzalah in my neighborhood. And I got 15 volunteers of my friends who volunteered in the ambulance with me. And I said, why don't we start volunteering before ambulances? And my friend said, we love the idea. I said, the same way the doctor saw the ambulance, we could get the emergencies before the ambulances are actually dispatched and get there quickly. And our goal would be 90 seconds. And that's how we started. We went over to the ambulance organization that we volunteered in, and we actually offered our services, and they didn't like it so much. It wasn't existing in Israel then. And they went ahead and they said, you know what, if someone calls for help, he has to get an ambulance first. And they didn't want to share the emergency with us. So we decided to use some Israeli chutzpah. It's taking some Israeli courage. And we said, if they don't want to share the emergency calls with us, we went ahead and we bought police scanners and we tapped into the emergency calls. And that's how we started with 15 volunteers with 2 scanners. And that's how we started United Hatzalah of Israel many years ago.
Was this in 92?
This is in 89.
In 89. So this was before cell phones and internet, really.
Way before cell phones and internet. This was an idea of just buying a scanner, and I had money left over from my bar mitzvah, and I used it to buy in Radio Shack, which doesn't exist either. We bought scanners, and we were just listening into the calls. And if we had a call nearby us, we just ran there. And the first call that I went to and responded to was a man who was hit by a car. And I ran there, it was 30 seconds away from me. And when I got there, it was people surrounding this person and no one knew what to do. And I just walked over, and this person is laying on the floor, bleeding all over. And I took my yarmulke, I took it off my head to stop his bleeding from his neck because I had no bandages on me. And I just pushed it in as much as I could. It was bleeding really, really bad. And then eventually when the ambulance arrived, they took him to the hospital. I wasn't sure if he'll survive or not. But then I get a phone call 2 days later. They say, you Eli Beer? I said, yes. And this man says, my father was treated by you 2 days ago. And he woke up this morning at Hadassah Hospital. We want to thank you for saving his life.
Wow.
And that was the most incredible phone call I got. And I said, could I come visit him? He said, of course. And I came to visit him in Hadassah. And I come into the room, and this man is laying on a bed, and he gives me this incredible hug that I will never forget.
Wow.
And that's when I realized, after he took his hands off me, that he had a number on his hand.
Mm.
And I got to save his life by just stopping his bleeding. I wasn't a professor from Harvard or any expert. I was just an EMT who knew a little, and I knew enough to stop his bleeding. And I didn't have any bandages. I just had a yarmulke. That's how I stopped his bleeding. And that's how it started.
That's really amazing. I mean, there's so many layers of meaning to that story, to go from, someone who survived the Holocaust, which is the ultimate symbol of Jewish powerlessness, to now be in an independent, thriving state of Israel that has the technology and the ingenuity and the entrepreneurship to save people with your kippah. I mean, this is, this is just, it's really unbelievable. I don't mean to get too bogged down on the technology, but I just think it's so amazing that here you had an idea and you started this organization and this effort with such an important need, and then cell phones and internet come along only later, as if your idea was waiting for that technology that probably launched your effectiveness sky high.
Definitely. We started with low tech, very, very simple low tech. Walkie-talkies were existing from World War I, I think. We used the simple scanner idea that's used everywhere. Every truck driver in America had a scanner. That's what we started with. But eventually we started becoming not only a volunteer innovating organization in terms of the idea, the neighbor saving a bypass or a neighbor, the idea was taking the ambulance, which was important, and bringing them secondary, not The first ones could be the next door neighbor, the nurse, the doctor, the EMT, the one who's a plumber or electrician or baker. If they know how to save a life, they should be the ones. And then when eventually we started inventing this idea of the ambucycle, a motorcycle ambulance. It wasn't existing anywhere around the world, taking a motorcycle, turning it into an ambulance, giving it to volunteers to respond. They would use it for their daily use. And if they would know about an emergency nearby them, they would stop everything and go. And then eventually when we got the ability, this is 14 years ago, before iPhone, before Waze, before all these big technologies came after, before Uber, we were the first ones to connect volunteers basically on their location, GPS location, to the emergency. So if something would happen, we would have in our old Java phones, old Nextels, if you remember the Nextel services, we had a GPS on it, and we would know the closest 5 volunteers to every emergency. And we would dispatch them automatically. And that reduced our response time in half.
Amazing.
And that's what we always focused on, making sure that if something chas v'shalom happens, we will have someone fast enough, within 90 seconds or less, saving that person's life.
That's really amazing. Can you tell us, what it took for you to be recognized by the official authorities, by the government, Magen David Adom? That must have been an uphill battle.
Yeah, that was, I could write a couple of books about that. It's really the story of Eretz Israel, the story of Judea and Samaria, the story of Petach Tikva, the story of, you first build and then ask for permission. We always say in Israel, you always say, you rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, right?
Yeah, it's easier to say sorry than to ask.
Exactly. That's what you do in Israel. So we actually, for instance, the ambucycles, we did not ask for permission from the police or any other authorities before we went ahead and we created the ambucycles. I said to my friends, listen, if we go ahead and we ask for permission, we're never going to get it. We're going to be 100 years old till we get the permission. So what we did is we actually created it looking the most official looking that you could, you actually, when people saw it, wow, it looks like so official. Emergency vehicle, please, that we gave them special cards to volunteers that they could show the police if they ever get questioned. But it was done by us. I think about 10 years after we started. We showed them how many lives were saved because of these ambucycles. Thousands of lives. We were saving everyday people all around the country with these ambucycles. And then when we came to the government, we said to them, we need authorization for everything, for our organization, for the ambucycles. Then they couldn't say no anymore because you can't stop an incredible machine that saves lives.
Yeah. It's the Nachshon approach, right? Nachshon didn't ask, should I go into the Yam Suf? He jumped in. Exactly. We have a great question here in the chat from Debbie and Julio Berger, who are asking, can you give us some sense of the statistics of what you guys do on how many responses you have on a daily basis, and what sort of government assistance do you get? And they also want to know about a program about dedicating a day or something like that.
All right. So great question. So, we almost treated, since we started in 1989, we treated almost 5 million people all around the country. People that get help sometimes a few times a year, elderly people. All these people got their help for free. We don't charge any money. Hatzalah, United Hatzalah of Israel, and any Hatzalah around the world doesn't charge for any services, even transport. We don't charge anything. Now we treat about 2,000 people a day in Israel. I'm talking about here in Herzliya, where I am now, we probably go out to 50 calls a day in this city, but it's all around the country. Yerushalayim is our busiest city. So the calls that we treat is every type of emergency people could imagine. Chas v'shalom, someone is in a heart attack or in a stroke or in a car accident. We will be there in seconds. And of course, delivering babies. And we started this program about a year and a half ago that people could dedicate a day of life saving. Let's say, a yahrzeit or anniversary or a special event that they have, and they could be the sponsor of the day and actually get a book of every single emergency that happened
Wow.
that day, which is incredible. And my father had a yahrzeit. My mother got a book of every single emergency that happened, and my mother was reading it line by line. In an average day, you could almost get to 2,000 calls, which is incredible.
Wow. Wow. That's really amazing. I also wanted to, first of all, do you still go out on calls?
I do, not as much as I should. Every Hatzalah volunteer has to go out to at least 30 calls a month. We demand from cities like Yerushalayim at least one call a day. But I'll tell you something. My wife and my children make it up for me. I have 4 volunteers. My daughter went out yesterday in a shift with an ambulance. She started right after Shabbos in Yerushalayim, and she finished at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she went out to 12 emergencies last night.
Wow.
So I should go to more, but unfortunately I travel a lot, and I do a lot of the speaking.
You're enabling all the other responders.
That's I go out to about 4 calls a month.
Wow. Wow.
Which
I just want to mention, I don't want to tell the story for you, but I was watching the news clip from Israel when you came back after battling COVID here. And I believe when they were filming you guys, your daughter went out on a call while they were interviewing and filming you guys. Am I correct?
No, the story is almost correct. The story was that when I woke up in the hospital, first of all, they didn't. I woke up twice. The first time I woke up, they thought I'm okay, and then my situation got even worse because of the, I got a really bad pneumonia, and it was really, really bad. They didn't know how to control it anymore. My lungs were shut, so they had to put me again into a coma, and again put me on a ventilator. So the hopes, everyone was crying and davening, of course, and my children were busy doing chesed. I told them before I went into a coma, please do chesed in my honor. I said, I just do chesed in my schus. So when I woke up, the doctors were trying to reach my wife, Kitty, and to tell her that I woke up and she wasn't answering the phone. And usually she would answer right away if she'd get a phone call from the hospital. She wasn't answering. And finally, after about an hour, they reached her, and she and my daughter were delivering a baby in Ramoth while I woke up. So
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. It's if I'm not mistaken, the members of United Hatzalah come not just from Jewish Israeli, but I believe you have members from across the spectrum. And just to couple that with another question, and that is, I would imagine, do you see yourself as a little bit, part of like Hasbara at this point? Because I do know that you guys do a lot of work, demonstrating to other people outside of Israel, how to do first response so effectively with the United Hatzalah model. So I'm sure that's such a wonderful message to send, from Israel, that not only do we have this very creative, effective idea, but it brings so many different people together.
Well, you know what? When originally we started the United Hatzalah, all we were thinking about saving lives, and that was our main mission, and still is our main mission. But incredible things happen because of that. Like the added value of United Hatzalah is the Kiddush Hashem. Like the Kiddush Hashem from United Hatzalah is unbelievable. And to see people who don't know what Kiddush Hashem is, it's Tikkun Olam. To see this incredible thing coming out, and the fact that we have in United Hatzalah Israel, men and women, religious volunteers, ultra-Orthodox volunteers, regular Orthodox volunteers, secular volunteers, and Arab volunteers, Druze, Muslims, and Christians, is unbelievable. It's a mishmash of everyone living here in Israel. It's like the most amazing thing. You come into Hatzalah, into our headquarters in Yerushalayim. I've ever been there. I'm sure many of your community came. I have many friends, and United Hatzalah is, grateful for your community, for the Englewood community to support United Hatzalah for so many years. You come in there and you'll see Mikem Chayisrael. You really see the beauty about Judaism. We include everyone. Whoever wants to be a lifesaver can be part of United Hatzalah. And I'll tell you a funny secret. Our biggest enemy in Israel our biggest enemy in Israel. His name is Hassan Nasrallah. You probably heard his name before. We had an article in one of the newspapers in Israel, Israel Hayom. They wrote a big article about Hassan Nasrallah, who saves Jewish people every day. A volunteer of United Hatzalah by the name of Hassan Nasrallah. Not mishpacha. Not mishpacha. By the way, I never spoke about it. The first time I'm thinking about it. He's an incredible volunteer, Hassan Nasrallah. Hassan Nasrallah saved hundreds of people's lives, Jews and Christians, Muslims, and that's United Hatzalah.
Wow, that's amazing. I do want to get to your personal story a little bit more, but before I do that, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how COVID has impacted United Hatzalah.
I'll tell you, when COVID started, I was traveling. I was in APAC, the week of APAC. Israel was just getting COVID to Israel. Like they didn't know what to do. It was like, oh, we're shutting down Israel, quarantine, and it was a new thing. And all of a sudden, United Hatzalah, we were prepared for a small pandemic, not this kind of pandemic. No one knew. We thought maybe it'll have like some kind of thing. We always had it in the storage. We had some protection gear and stuff, but we never thought this was going to come in. And all of a sudden I get phone calls from Israel, and the chief of operations, Dovi Maisel, calls me up. He says, Eli, we need to buy 100,000 kits of protection gear. I said, you're Meshuggah, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy? What are you know how much money we're going to throw away? It's like, and he says, no, we need it desperately. And he was coming out with these like Psurot Iyov, like the Iyov, like saying that it's going to be terrible, like what he's coming at. And I didn't even imagine what's going to happen. Exactly. I didn't even know what's going to happen to me a few days later, me personal. And I told Dovi, listen, if we have no choice, if you really believe this is, let's go for it, because Chas v'shalom, I don't want anyone of our volunteers to be in danger. And then what happened was we started, get prepared for this terrible pandemic that everyone's talking about. All of a sudden I got sick and I found myself in the ICU in Israel, in Miami, sorry. And I wasn't feeling well. I found myself in ICU, and I'm on the phone all day with Israel. I'm saying, I didn't know it was COVID. I thought it was maybe a pneumonia or something. They didn't exactly know it was COVID in the beginning. It took them a few days to get the results, but they suspected I have COVID. And I was shocked that I have COVID, but I said, okay, let's get ready for this. One of the things that happened, most amazing things that happened to an organization like United Hatzalah, is we were busy doing a lot of emergencies like car accidents and other emergencies, but the volume of emergencies went down because less people were going to work. All the people that were older than 65 had to stay at home. There were lockdowns. And eventually when I got sick and then they put me on a ventilator, I was out. Israel went into a lockdown, complete lockdown during Pesach, right before Pesach. Israel went down to lockdown. No one was supposed to go out of their homes. A lot less emergency happened. So the leadership of Hatzalah here went ahead and they started a humanitarian. They went out and it was unbelievable what they did. They took all the volunteers. They asked all the volunteers to respond not only to emergencies, but humanitarian emergencies. People who were left over with no food, older people who had no medicine. And incredible things happened from it. Tens of thousands of people called Hatzalah, not only for medical stuff, but for just help, chesed. And that's what they were busy. So we had 60,000 emergencies for chesed, not for medical, that's besides medical, that were responded by United Hatzalah volunteers. And that's something that I think that's why I'm alive, because of this chesed that they were doing.
Wow. It's fascinating. There's obviously COVID creates so many unexpected, scenarios, but it's so fascinating to hear that certain calls went down, as you guys were responding to other things. It's really, really, really amazing. I'm also curious, for some people, they get so much nachas, from what they've created, the family that they built. When I was watching, your videos that you were putting out, And I looked on YouTube last night to catch up on some of the news reports and things like that. The most moving moment for me, which was so, tears were coming down my eyes, was when you came home, when you came back to Israel, and the United Hatzalah volunteers were all there to welcome you. To me, that seems like a moment to see the impact you've had on people in the most clear, overt way. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, and it's very personal, but can you tell us what you were thinking when you landed and you saw this whole array of ambucycles and ambulances and volunteers and of course your family? It was just, it was so moving.
I'll tell you, I will never forget the moment when I got off the plane. And first of all, I saw my family. I was so happy to see them. You know, I never thought I would hug them again, because when I said goodbye to them that evening, when I was, you know, my children were in Israel, my whole family, and then we were saying goodbye. I thought, this is it. You know, I'm never going to see them again. And then to see them and hug them, it was amazing. And then all of a sudden they surprised me with this almost 1,000 volunteers were there, and I was like shocked more than anything. And I actually started pinching myself and saying, is this real? Is this, maybe it's my funeral? I actually thought it was my funeral. And it was shocking. You know, I was still in a little deliriums from being in the hospital. And after a while, I just realized these volunteers came from all around the country, from Eilat, the Golan Heights. I never liked that. You know, I never liked the kavod and everything, but it was like, after a few minutes, like I said, wow, these people are special. And it's a big family. These people come from the backgrounds. You can't connect these backgrounds for anything. People who are left or right, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Arab, Jew, settlement, everyone in between. And they were all there and just greeting me. Not all the volunteers, of course, but had hundreds and hundreds. And that moment I'll never forget. And I wish I could have hugged every single one.
I'm sure you've been asked this question many times, but given the experience that you had personally with COVID, being a patient in intensive care, someone whose life was in danger, has it given you a new perspective on the work that you do?
It's a terrific question. I'll tell you, I always believed my whole life that Hatzalah, you know, Hatzalah is one of the most amazing things that ever, you know, I think one of the greatest things that were invented by Jewish people. A person wakes up 3 o'clock in the morning, runs out with pajamas to save some old lady he doesn't even know, and pick her up and help her, and then put her back in bed if needed. And then his whole night is destroyed. He can't go back to work. He can't go back to sleep. And then he goes to work so tired. But that's the type of volunteers they are. They are people who are selfless. Is that the right word?
Yeah, selfless.
Selfless. These people put all their lives to help other people, and they get zero in return. Zero. Hatzalah is just an amazing idea. People just want to do chesed. I always say that if you have to pay, someone said to me quite a few times, I had a question like, if you had to pay someone for, let's say, for doing this work, what would you pay? I said, let's say I pay $50 for every call they go. I said, if I pay $50, a really good salary, $50 an hour, like one emergency, their motivation would go down 80%. Because right now they do it for zero. They do it for the chesed, for the mitzvah, for the feelings, for the good feelings. I think this organization is really something that I can't even explain the satisfaction that it gives the volunteers by helping other people. And I forgot what was the question?
So the question is, do you feel like you have a new perspective on the work you do?
Oh, yeah. So I'm sorry, because I was like talking about the volunteer now. This is something that I always told all the volunteers in Israel. When you treat a patient, you have to go down to their level. If someone's on the floor, go down to the floor and look at them in the eyes to be in the same level with them. So you are there in their eyes, looking at them, and you make them feel like you're on the same level with them, the patient on the floor. It could be someone, he vomited a whole thing and he's having terrible pains and everything. You go down to their level, they feel much better. After being in the hospital and getting treated in the hospital and finding myself waking up after a month, losing 36 pounds, can't walk to the bathroom. I found myself in a diaper and I needed help from the nurses and they were doing an amazing job. But then I realized, and I tell this to all the Hatzalah volunteers, that when I always said you go down to their level, go down 1 inch or 2 inches lower than them. Make them feel more important. That's what I needed. When I was in the hospital, I felt the worst of I'm a healthy guy. I find myself like that. I never knew if I could walk again. And I wanted the Hatzalah volunteers, and I realized that this is why maybe I was in the hospital, to see what the patient feels like in the worst moments of his life. And I went through it, and now I know how to deliver this to the volunteers. And Hatzalah volunteers, that's what they do.
Wow. And you know what? As you were talking, I realized that it's right there in the Torah, because when Hashem breathes life into Adam Harishon, when he gives him life, it's Vaypach be'apav nishmat chayim. He breathed it into his nostrils. That means Hashem, Kaviyachol, was literally face to face. He was at eye line, exactly as you tell your first responders. That's exactly how Hashem gave us life.
Wow.
It's really true. It's really true. And I just want to, I want to give a shout out because we're blessed to have Noah Elbogen here in our community, who's a board member with United Hatzalah, and I know who is working on helping to spread the work of United Hatzalah, and that's a part of the. We don't really use the term hasbara so much anymore, but that's part of the real bracha of United Hatzalah as an Israeli innovation. That it's being marketed and broadcast worldwide, and hopefully more and more communities will be able to benefit from your idea, Eli.
Look, it's really a big mitzvah to show the world what the Israeli innovations that come out of this country, and it's really a Jewish innovation of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. This is a Jewish idea. I know other religions, take that slogan and they use it as well, but it's really a Jewish thing. It's Rabbi Akiva that said, Hillel that said, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Hillel Zaken, right? This is the whole Torah. We Jews, and I always say that, we take the day off on Shabbos. We take the day off on Shabbos. You offer us $1 million. A Shomer Shabbos person will never do anything for $1 million, $10 million. You never drive a car to do a business deal on Shabbos. But to save a life, we would go for free. And we don't even know who we're going to save. It could be we'll save a little lady from Beit Safafa, an Arab woman. We don't care if she's Jewish or not Jewish. We don't care if she's our family or not our family. We go to save human beings. And I talk about this around the world. I spoke this in Arab countries. I spoke in front of the Queen of Jordan. I spoke in Dubai about this. I spoke in India about this. People are fascinated. And I think the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem is huge. And United Hatzalah has a very important role in that.
Amazing. So I would imagine, getting to know you in this conversation and knowing your reputation, I would imagine you're always thinking of what's next. And I'm just curious, what's next for United Hatzalah? Is there going to be a United Arab Emirates United Hatzalah branch? What's on the horizon?
So when I missed Pesach this year with my family. I woke up a day after Pesach. So I was very, very disturbed by that. And I made a Pesach Sheni, which was amazing, but it wasn't enough. I missed Pesach. So this Sukkot, unfortunately, they shut down the country again. They had a second lockdown. And I told my wife, we need to go somewhere. I need to spend some time with the kids. I didn't see the kids for a long time because right after I got back to Israel, I went back straight to therapy and to Hatzalah. I was busy. I wanted to make sure Hatzalah doesn't get affected by the fact that I got sick. For 2 months I was out, and I want to make sure Hatzalah needs the right funding, and I had to work hard to make sure we don't get affected by the slowdown in the economy. And I told my family, let's go to Dubai for Yontif. And I have a lot of friends there. They have two shuls there in Dubai. And I let the shuls know I'm coming. I'll split my time between the two shuls. And Rabbi Levi Duchman, the Rabbi of Chabad there, arranged a sukkah for us. And I met some business leaders in Dubai, Arab business leaders. One of them is a person by the name of Muhammad, who is one of the greatest business leaders in the Emirates. And he owns the Burj Khalifa and many other huge buildings, probably a few hundred buildings all over the Emirates. And when he heard about United Hatzalah, we spent some time in his home with his wife and kids in his office. He showed us around and he gave us royalty of treatment. He said, you know what? I had enough making money. Every day people come over to me with ideas. Let's do this, let's do that. He says, I have billions of dollars. I'm okay. He says, I love the idea of Hatzalah. I want to bring it to Arab countries. I said, Ahlan wa you know what? You're our neighbors. You made peace with us, your country. You'd love to start it here. So he's, Bezrat Hashem, going to go ahead and help us start it there. And he wants to start it in other countries as well. And I think this could bring the countries together. I believe that Israel has so much to share with our neighbors. And I think United Hatzalah is one of these things.
Wow. Listen, Ubacharta B'chaim, the Jewish people have always chosen life. We pursue life at all costs. It's our highest value. And I know, again, seeing some of your videos, reading what you've been talking about, your messages to people about COVID and safety have been so important and so on the money. I know myself, my friends here in Englewood and people, worldwide owe you such hakarat hatov for the important work you're doing, the Kiddush Hashem that you're doing, the way that you've shared your innovation to better the lives of millions and millions of people. Our brachot for you is Hashem Yishmor Tzeitcha Uvoecha. Every time you go out on a call, every time you go out on a trip, and wherever you go, Hashem should protect, Hashem should support and enable Eli Beer and United Hatzalah to go on and do so many more good things. And I also just want to mention, one of our members, Ruth Shapiro, mentioned on the chat that we have a young man in the ICU right now battling COVID, Yitzchak Ben Esther. I know you all join me in praying that he has a refuah shlema. Eli, thank you so much for being with us. I'll give you the last word.
Thank you for having us. I can't wait to be in your shul when the whole shul is there. You have a huge, beautiful shul. And I know all the members love you. And I'm friendly with so many people in Englewood and the members of the shul. And of course, Noah, but many others. And I hope to come speak there in real, to see the people, to hug the people, to go back to normal, so we can spread the word. And I would love us all to share the United Hatzalah website if anyone wants to support and learn more. It's easy to remember. It's israelrescue.org. We didn't call it, we also have unitedhatzalah.org, but Hatzalah is so hard to spell. And I had people by mistake went into the Hezbollah website and donated $18 or so. No, I'm just kidding. But people spell it wrong. So we call it israelrescue.org. And people can learn more and support. And hopefully, Bezrat Hashem, you'll all come to Eretz Yisrael and live with us here.
Thank you. And I also just want to give a special thank you, Karat Tov, to Evan and Diana Zischoltz, who made the connection, who enabled this program to happen. This was such a fascinating talk. I really appreciate Eli, you sharing with us this morning, and continue to feel well. And I hope Bezrat Hashem very soon we'll all be able to be together physically, as you just said.
And Evan, thank you. Within 10 minutes of the time we spoke, it was done. So
that's what it means to be a first responder. Response time.
We need him as a first responder, right?
Exactly. All right. Shalom.
Shalom. Thank you so much, all of you.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.